The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. This morning I'd like to talk about awareness. This topic came to mind because I suddenly one day remembered something that happened when I first came to the monastery. And I don't know, 2 or 3 of us novices were chatting somewhere, and one of them said, "There's something that's just driving me crazy." He said, "I realized that I'm the only one in the universe who knows what's going on in my head." And it scared the whatever out of him. He felt marooned, isolated, different, just really uncomfortable with that. And I had never thought about such a thing before that time, and hopefully wherever he may be now, he no longer has to think those thoughts. But that's what thoughts are. They're something that we can sympathize with or relate to, maybe understand when people try to express their thoughts. But we can never know what it's like to have whatever is churning around in our skulls. We can never understand how that is for another person. Sometimes, some years later, I thought it probably had just happened that I was with someone who we were talking about somebody else, and they said, "What's she like?" Well, you know, people ask that all the time, and you say, "Oh, she's this, that, she likes this, she does that." But that's like trying to understand someone else's thoughts. We have no idea what each other are really like, in the sense that of really knowing them as they might know themselves, which is fine. It's probably a good idea, because, being surrounded by mind readers would not be a very pleasant way of living. Anyway, all of this is just thoughts. It has nothing to do with awareness. We can get trapped in thoughts so that they're circular, good thoughts, bad thoughts, neutral thoughts, things we should think, things that we feel ashamed of thinking, evaluating, seeing everything, the way I think it should be. I wouldn't have arranged the dishes that way. I would have arranged them some other way, or, the picture's crooked, or all of that. Emotions are much different than thoughts. They have no content. Content may be attached to emotions, but pure emotions have no real content. They arise, they pass away, and once they're gone, we can remember feeling them, but we can never reproduce what it felt like to feel them in the moment. And it's probably a good thing that we can't remember how we feel them, how they felt. I can't imagine if every time I tried to go back to an unpleasant circumstance, I had the whole emotion recreated over in my mind. That would be a hell. That would be true suffering. So awareness, also known familiarly now as mindfulness, is an entirely different subject. And I'm going to start by letting you hear what Bhikkhu Bodhi, a Theravadan monk who is a real scholar, but also has a beautiful way of being able to to talk about all of the Buddha's teachings in very accessible ways. Here we go, my dart has. Mindfulness is presence of mind, attentiveness, or awareness. Yet the kind of awareness involved in mindfulness differs profoundly from the kind of awareness at work in our usual mode of consciousness. All consciousness involves awareness in the sense of knowing or experiencing of an object, but with the practice of mindfulness, awareness is applied at a special pitch. The mind is deliberately kept at the level of bare attention, which is a phrase that appears in many of the Theravadan teachings, not just plain attention, but bare attention. A detached observation of what is happening within us and around us in the present moment. In the practice of right mindfulness, the mind is trained to remain in the present, open, quiet, and alert, contemplating the present event. And that's the aspect of awareness that I would like to talk about, which is present moment mindfulness and what it's like to just be aware of things with space around them, if that makes sense, without opinions around them or emotions or whatever. Great Master Dogen, in the Rules for Meditation, when he says, think of neither good nor evil, consider neither right nor wrong, just sitting with no deliberate thought is the lawful gateway to carefree peace. No deliberate thought in the practice of awareness is what happens. I don't know if this is a shared feeling about awareness, but to me, when we talk about practicing meditation in everyday life, the kind of meditation that we do every day from the time we get up from our cushions, for me, awareness is the practice of meditation in daily life. John Sumedo, who I'm going to read a number of things from, he says that when he went to Thailand to become a monk, he says, what I was interested in was not being blinded by light, but being able to see clearly, to know in clarity, not to be caught in endless doubt, in skeptical problems I created through habitual thinking and conceptual proliferation. You know, I think for many of us, when we come to Buddhism, we have this idea, maybe it's because the word enlightenment has light in it, but that the objective is some blinding experience of, I don't know, 4th of July inside your head or something like that. But he was quite clear. He was coming to find freedoms from suffering. And that is why we're all here. And a blinding light may free one from suffering for a few minutes, but it's not going to last for 5 years. Awareness observes things just as they are. When we don't allow things to be as they are, then we're trying to get something that we don't have, or get rid of something that we don't want. Suffering is, I want things to be different than they are. Just this morning, I remembered something that happened in the first few years that I was coming up here as a lay resident. And a monk had told me something, I don't even remember what it was. And the first lay person I bumped into that was in the guest house, I immediately ran to tell them whatever it was I'd been told. And when I walked back out the door, I was suddenly gripped with this. All I can feel is like I was being constricted, just overcome with shame. Because the lifelong inclination, whenever someone told you something interesting, the first thing you would do is go and, tell your best friend, and if not your best friend, then someone else who happened to be handy. The idea of getting something juicy and then feeling important, maybe, is that what it is? But to be able to pass it on and feel special. And all I can remember with that suffocating, crushing shame was a desire to do something. It wanted to propel me out to go, say, apologize to someone or tell someone I shouldn't have done that, and anything to get rid of that shame. But there was nothing I could do. And I didn't know at the time that I was experiencing what John Semedo is talking about, is the suffering that can happen when we're trying to get rid of something we don't want. Shame. The nice thing about awareness is you don't need to purify it. You don't have to do anything about it. Whatever way you are feeling now, whether you like it or not, whether it's inspired or depressed, right or wrong, sane or crazy, it is what is in the moment. So in terms of purifying the mind, consciousness is already pure. It's as simple as saying, so this is how shame feels. You don't have to explain why to yourself. You don't need to find the beginning of it or what made it start. The question is, do we have the willingness to just sit there and just be? As long as it takes for shame to dissolve. Because of course it will, nothing lasts. And as I said at the beginning, that we can remember how we can remember that we felt something. We can't remember how it felt, which is a very good thing. With awareness, what you're doing is allowing yourself to experience whatever state of mind you may be in. Worry, joy, confusion, anger, boredom, satisfaction. Emotion is just what it is. You can't even define it in your head, let alone speak about what it is what it is like. The minute you do, you are no longer in the place of awareness, you're in the place of thought. Awareness is spacious. I find it really useful to pay attention to what is there in the awareness but not to let myself own it, in the sense that if I that I can go back at some later time and think about being aware. Well, you can't think about being aware. You can only you can only be aware of being aware. Does that make sense? It isn't like believing in something. It's learning to relax and just be. It's not dividing anything. It's not judging it. It just lets everything be as it is. If we trust in the ability to simply be here, open and receptive to whatever's happening now, we are finding a place, an oasis, perhaps you could say. It's a place where you can actually explore, in the sense of experience, not thinking, what fear feels like, or satisfaction, or a happy tummy after a good meal, or anger and rage. When you're sitting still in awareness with all of these feelings, it's like someone took the bullets out of the gun. It's like defusing something. It's just you there with whatever it is. It lets everything be as it is. Now, many people seek out serene places, like lakes, the tops of mountains, waterfalls, because when they get there, the quiet, the beauty, opens them up in a way that they find very inviting, but are unable to find in normal way. I had a friend, she and her husband used to go fishing, and Elvira didn't care a hoot about catching a fish, but she liked to sit there with an unbaited thing, in the water, so no one would know that she wasn't fishing, so she was looking like fishing, and she would just sit there, and she really looked forward to that. It was her vacation where she could sit under a tree and hold a pole. We're lucky because we're learning ways to do that without having to go to the top of a mountain. I can remember when I was 17, I learned how to ski, or let's put it this way, I was learning how to ski. And I was at a ski place on Lake Tahoe. And the lifts went really high. There were 3 in succession. So when you got to the top, you were at the top. And I got up there and I got off the lift, and for some reason there was no one else around. And then I turned around and I was standing, I don't know how high. It was unearthly quiet, just quiet. And there was this lake down there. I'd never experienced anything that felt like that moment of just becoming empty. And just staring at the lake, it was hard to go away, but if you're standing there for too long, you get cold enough to be motivated. There's something that makes us feel our relative size. We know how small we are, but also that we're absolutely part of whatever it is we're looking at. Now, being in a pleasant state of mind is not a prerequisite for awareness. Awareness is for everything. So Sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's Lake Tahoe, but the awareness is no different. That which listens to your self-criticisms and self-judgments, that which listens, that is your refuge. Not trying to think about your self-criticisms or self-judgments. Strong emotions can arise, and letting go is not resisting or getting rid of, but letting it be what it is, which is probably the definition maybe of awareness, of let everything, everybody be as they are. It doesn't mean that we have to let a disaster be as it is and not do anything about it. That's thinking about it, which is wonderful, because in a disaster, quick thinkers are needed. But the practice of awareness is to also have the space where you can sit still with anything and everything. So I think what I'll do now is let John Semedo describe what life is like for him after, I don't know how old he is now, maybe his mid-80s. This book was written, probably 10 years ago or more, but I'm sure nothing has changed. So after however many years he spent as a monk, this is one of the fruits of his practice. He says, I've traveled a lot in the past 20 years, all over the world. When you're traveling, you have to wait in line to go through customs and immigration. Wait in line for your baggage, a lot of waiting. So I've developed this into a meditation practice. When I first started traveling, I could see that when I got into a line, like waiting for them to check my passport, there was something in me that just wanted to get through. Get this over with, get inside the departure lounge, and then I'd feel impatient and wonder whether I got in the right line or not, because that one looked longer now, and it's shorter. Somebody in front is holding me up. So a kind of resentment and restlessness would develop. It could be quite a miserable situation, because the main thing was to get through and meet the people who had invited me. I began to reflect on this restlessness and impatience. I started regarding being in line as a meditation, and I watched. He didn't think about it, he watched. Now I can observe these tendencies of mine, such as disliking the bureaucracy of immigration, or wanting to get out of a plane as soon as possible to meet people. I quite like the whole process, going to Heathrow Airport and just seeing what happens. But this is one example of how to take something that is a necessity, like traveling, such as waiting for your bag to appear on the carousel, and contemplating it. Only one time in all these years has my bag ever been the first to come out. So I would get the trolley and move to the carousel. It would start, and as the bags would start popping up, I would contemplate the moment when I saw my bag for the first time. There was a kind of happiness in that, a kind of relief, because there was always the thought that maybe they didn't put it on the plane, or they sent it off somewhere else, and would it really appear? So just noticing that relief, noticing the relief, quite a happy moment when you spot your bag on the carousel. It's like that as you gain confidence and awareness, in this connected awareness. That is the easiest way, by noticing awareness and using it as a reference point, by learning to sustain attention and to recognize it everywhere you go. At first I could observe it when things were quiet and still. It was difficult in noisy places or traffic jams, in airport lines, in meetings and conferences, and when talking to somebody or listening to music or whatever. But then you begin to recognize that awareness underlies everything all the time. Then he says over here, the universe is one. The whole universe is conscious, and this is the reality of consciousness. It includes everything. And that's the talk for today.